turn off notifications.
It's a good idea. It's a good idea. I'll do the same. Do not disturb. Are we live on all the channels? Great. Oh no. Okay, good.
No,
All
we're
right.
good.
So we're we're here. We are here at the agency hot seat. I am joined again by fan favorite, I must say, fan favorite, Nick Petroski.
I do my
Uh,
best. It's all I can do.
that's right, Nick Petroski of Promethean, and we're here to run it back. And for those of you that have not been with us before and are new to the agency hot seat, as a reminder, this is a free form, free flowing 30 to 60-minute window where you can come and ask us, myself, Nick, any questions that you have around agency finance, agency sales, leadership, horoscopes, whatever you've got. We are here dedicated to answer it for you. Again, I am your host, Ryan Watson, original founding partner here at Upsourced, joined again by Nick Petroski of Promethean. Nick, why don't you just quickly introduce yourself for those that are new to your excellence?
Yeah, for sure. First off, thanks for having me. Um, Beyond that, we
Pleasure.
do research and consulting for digital agencies. Um, I tried to find out stuff that other people can't find out and then give it away as much as I can. So hopefully that helps you make a better agency and makes running one a little less stressful.
And we love it. So, format is if you have questions and you're watching on either YouTube or LinkedIn, go ahead and drop those in the comments. Caroline is standing by. She will read. We will answer. As always, we've got a handful of questions that have come in from email and other sources. So we'll start with those, and then we'll sort of filter in the rest of the questions as they come. Cool. All
Sounds
right. I
good.
think housekeeping aside, let's get into it. Caroline, what do we got? First question.
Awesome. So our first question is, how should we set sales compensation and commission?
Ooh, sales compensation and commission. Okay, that's good, right? And I think this is a good, we're having a lot of, this is end of year. I'm actually in the process I'm a little bit late, Caroline, on finalizing an end of year guide. I'm still working on it though. And one of the topics that has come up a lot with clients and is obviously featured on this sort of end of year, what should I be thinking about, is the idea of compensation and how should I think about changes to compensation towards the end of the year. And another thing that sort of pops up is like when your brain is in that world, how do I think about setting salesperson compensation, whether it's setting a quota and an on-target earnings or adjusting those year over year? So I can certainly start and give my 2 cents. And then
Yeah.
Nick, I don't know if you've got any thoughts or points of view on this topic as well. Um,
Yeah, we did some research
so
on it, so I'm happy to share.
well, let's start with your research then. You go
Start with the
first, and then
research,
I'll.
start with the
Yeah,
data.
why
All right.
not? Yeah, let's
All
start
right.
with the data, and then I'll give you my this is my framework for how to do it mechanically.
Yeah, I like that. So bottom line is most agencies don't offer any kind of compensation. Like there's no variable bonuses, there's no
Yep.
spiffs, there's no anything tied to sales performance from most agency sales teams. And I personally think that's insane. Um, if you look at there's probably a lot of ways to slice this, but I look at it from the very base level of when you're hiring talent for sales in this space, uh, you're not just hiring talent from other agencies. You're hiring talent from all over. Like you do a post for a job post for a salesman or a salesperson, and that is going out to every industry. So if you're
Yeah.
doing something different than another industry, or a lot of other industries, and it's worse, you're not going to attract the level of talent
Adverse
that
selection.
they would exactly. You're cutting
Yeah.
yourself right out,
Uh,
right at the knees.
yeah.
So vast majority don't. Um, my view is I love to see like, I don't know, 5 to 20% uh of
Okay.
salary be variable.
Incentive comp. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you anecdotally. Obviously, we're not a research firm, so I don't have the data in a structured way. But yeah, I think it's accurate to say that. And in our case, it's complicated further by the sort of shared responsibility of sales. I mean, I think
Mhm.
starting like a large percentage of clients of ours don't have like a dedicated non-founder individual who's owning sales, right? So for that
Right.
reason, but even there are even those that do, it's a bit of a mixed bag on how the consideration is structured and whether there's a component that's incentive based or not. I tend to agree as well, which is salespeople are motivated by money and
A lot of them
setting
are, yeah.
incentive. I mean, so aligning incentives, like it's very difficult to create perfect incentive compensation structures
Mhm.
for folks that exist in cost centers or that have kind of subjective measures of success. But sales is this beautiful, domain where the metrics of success are perfectly objective and very transparent. And so it lends itself really well to incentive compensation. A couple things I'll say. The first is, and this is like step one that I see people kind of miss when thinking about sales compensation is just what do I want my salesperson to do? Right. And like
Mhm.
on a basic level, is my salesperson responsible for both existing customers and retaining them and growing those relationships as well as new customers? Are they only responsible for new customers? Like, what does that look like? I can tell you, I can think of one really clear anecdote where it was a client we had begun working with a year or maybe 2 years ago, and they had a sales individual who was highly compensated through revenue of any stripe
Mhm.
and for that reason had been devoting a disproportionate amount of their time to existing relationships because it was just easier. Like it was just a lot easier for them to maintain that relationship than to go get a new relationship. And so this client is struggling to get new logos and trying to figure out why is that the case. Well, look at the incentive structure. Your incentive structure is such that why would anybody do anything else, right? So like ask yourself, what is this person responsible for? And by the way, I'm not a giant fan of having one person who is dually responsible for both.
Mhm.
Not necessarily that I wouldn't have a person who might own a department who kind of controls both, but one person who's devoting a half of their time here versus half of their time there. It's an economic reality for some, but I'm not a crazy fan of that. So anyway, ask yourself like, what am I looking for? And if I'm looking for new logos, then my sales compensation is, or my incentive compensation is a function of my success against that particular thing. And so then like okay, so once I've decided okay, what is it that I'm trying to incentivize? I think mechanically is it's pretty straightforward. So the first question is like to your point, I'm going to go out to the market, I'm going to recruit one of these individuals. What is a market-based total compensation for
Mhm.
the kind of person necessary to do what it is you're looking for them to do in your organization? It could be an incredibly senior, it could be a very senior sales individual who might for whom the market-based compensation is three to $400,000.
Mhm.
In a lot of cases, it's not that person, right? It may be somebody for whom the market-based compensation is $150,000, right? And by the way, I'm talking about on target earnings, both base salary and commission, right? So first determine like, okay, how much, like what does that individual, what is a person who, uh, it, what is the market rate for the person that you need in your organization make? The second question is, to your point, what percentage of their overall compensation should be devoted to commission versus base salary? I've seen plenty of like 50-50 scenarios. That's about as aggressive as I've seen it. I don't, not to say that it doesn't exist in a world where it's like 20-80, 20% base, 80% commission. I'm sure there's zero hundreds out there, but like in a sort of mature organization, I don't see a lot that bias more aggressively than 50-50. And in the agency world, I see a lot, like you said, that are closer to like 70-30, 80-20, whatever that is. That's going to be a function of what are their other responsibilities, what is their risk tolerance, et
Mhm.
cetera. But you'll determine, okay, what is the sort of split? So for instance, if we've said on target earnings for somebody, a market based salary for somebody that is, of the experience level that I'm looking for is 150,000 all in, 20% of which needs to come from incentive comp. Okay, great. Their target commission is $30,000. The last thing I need to do is figure out like, okay, well, what is if for this $150,000 a year person to be worth it, what does doing a good job look like? Like, what does that look like? So, for instance, if they're responsible for new logos, what does doing a good job look like in terms of new logo generation? Is that $500,000 a year? Is that $1 million a year? What does that look like? And once you figure out what that looks like, then the math becomes pretty simple, right? Like if we've decided
Mhm.
that doing a good job looks like $1 million a year, and in order and in return for doing a good job, we've assigned $30,000 of incentive compensation, then they're going to earn 3%, for instance, on every new deal dollar. And at $1 million, they'll make $30,000. And there's all sorts of things that you can do to add, like spiffs, accelerators, whatever. But at its base, like the structure is kind of that simple. So anyway, that was a pretty long-winded explanation for like how to set it up. But to be honest with you, like so many people don't even know how to like go about thinking about it. It just becomes arbitrary. Like, oh, like I can't tell you how often it's like I'm thinking about giving them 2% or 4% or 8% or whatever the number. And it's like, well, hold on a second. You've gone all the way to the execution and you haven't started with like, what am I trying to do for whom? And what do I want the end result to look like? And that's the exercise first. And then the percentage of the sort of deal, for instance, is the result. It's the math. Anyway,
How hard is
that's
that
my
logistically? How hard is that from like an accounting perspective to keep track of that stuff?
oh, I mean, like to keep track of just like how much a salesperson has earned or
Yeah,
accrued over time.
yeah.
Not very hard. I mean,
No.
like it's, I mean, just from the standpoint of like, if, for instance, I'm going to compensate this individual for, let's say the math works that it's like 5% of new
Mhm.
logos. Well, then and again, you got to decide when do they earn it? Is it on a booking? Is it on a
Right.
revenue recognized? That obviously changes. To be honest with you, I like booking. I think that's what the salesperson is responsible for.
Mhm.
And so it's pretty easy to like ultimately you need a record keeping solution like a CRM in order to
Right.
have the deals in your pipeline and your deals that you've booked. But it's as simple as saying, yeah, here's my book deals. Here's the date I booked them, and here's the amount, and I'm going to slap 5% on them, and that's my sales accrual.
How do you ever see issues crop up with them being paid off bookings, but then cash not coming in off of like issues with AR or
Totally. Yeah. I mean, look, you so there's a couple things that you can do. So you can calculate off bookings and pay in like you
Mhm.
have so much flexibility, right?
Yeah.
I can tell you the agency I ran, we calculated off bookings. We paid quarterly, right? So we would look at bookings through the quarter, and then we would pay 30 days after the quarter ended.
Mhm.
At that point, the vast majority of those bookings have been invoiced and collected, but not all of it. And of course, if you're going to do that, you're going to put a provision in the compensation package to say, like, if this thing goes upside down or uncollectible, then we'll recapture it from future commission earned.
Mhm.
Now, the risk there, of course, is they leave the organization, then the AR goes upside down, and you have nobody to recapture from. I'm not sure that ever happened to us, but I will tell you that the way that we did it is about as sales friendly as it gets, right? It's more common that you'll see folks at least wait until the cash is collected in order to
Mhm.
pay the commission. And in many cases, they'll wait till both the cash is collected and the revenue is earned, not the bookings is
Interesting.
recorded,
Really, they'll go all the
right?
way through like, wow.
Yeah, so like this could be a year deal, and so I'm going
Yeah.
to collect commission on it as the work is done over the year because there is, I guess, the tail risk that the client sort of says, "Not can't project's canceled,
Yeah.
whatever," and so anyway, again, I think that's probably overly onerous. Um, I like bookings because that's what I want the salesperson to do, right? Like I have a delivery team who's responsible for getting that work delivered. My salespeople are responsible for booking the revenue. So I like to compensate on bookings, and then whether I wait for the cash to get collected or not, that's kind of a preference. If you can afford it, like and you have the float, it's incredibly seller friendly to pay it regardless. But a lot of agencies aren't necessarily in that position.
No.
Yeah.
No, they're not.
Fair enough. We fortunately had an AR line of credit and that we used, and so
Mm.
liquidity wasn't a challenge. Um, okay, so Caroline, we spent 15 minutes for question number one. Let's go to question number two.
Yeah, so our second question is starting to prep for 2025. How do I set my sales target for next year?
Hmm. Wow, you could go deep into forecasting on this. You want to do a forecasting
Yeah.
class for the next 45 minutes?
I'm gonna do
Can you do that?
that.
I want to refresh
Um,
my finance days.
yeah, yeah. Well, so, and again, I don't know if this is an area that you get into very often, Nick, or, but I guess just in general, and I'm thinking, I mean, maybe I'm hearing this question wrong. I don't actually know where it came from, but
You
I'm
answer
hearing
like
it.
Ryan, this is your
Yeah.
show.
Don't
Answer
put
what you
yourself in a
want.
box. Well,
Yes.
I'm hearing it from I'm hearing it from I'm working with a seller and trying to like rather than I'm trying to
Okay.
forecast my revenue for next year, I'm trying to
Right.
work with a seller to set like an individual quota or a sales target, right? That's how I'm hearing it. Um, well, I mean, do you want to go first? Or do you want me to go first?
Um, I'm gonna come at it from a more academic perspective because I don't do this on a day-to-day thing. So it'd
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
be more
yeah.
helpful to see your like
Okay,
actual
cool. I'll
tactical,
go.
like I've done this shit before.
Well, I mean, look, again, I would say that again, it goes back to what am I compensating this individual for, right? And so if I'm compensating this individual for existing revenue, renewals, upsells, whatever, as well as new logos, that's a different exercise than if I'm just doing new logos. I'll talk about both, right? Like, so if it's kind of let's say it's total revenue, even though that's not really my fan, or that's not really my favorite. Um, the existing revenue should be a pretty straightforward bottoms up account planning exercise, right?
Yeah.
I have these customers, right? I have done this amount of revenue with them in the previous whatever years, and I'm just going to go line by line, and I'm going to set expectations for what I think is possible for each one of these. By the way, those should be accompanied with actual like strategic top to top conversations about what their priorities are next year so that like my expectation of what is possible in terms of revenue is influenced by real information and not hopes and dreams, right? Because again,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So that we should do, and then theoretically we have some kind of reasonable estimate of existing revenue. And then on the new revenue side, to be honest with you, you can really overthink this. Like,
Hmm.
you can go really you can get really granular with regard to like, okay, I'm going to send this many emails, and those many emails are going to generate this many meetings, and this many meetings are going to generate this many proposals, and all these sorts of things. And I can get really quantitative about like, okay, this is what's possible. And by and large, like I think that kind of thinking, that foundation is good in that like your sales number shouldn't just be like I think I want it to be 2 million, even though like we've never done anything close to 2 million. One individual that I have on staff is not capable of they physically couldn't have enough meetings in order to convert that amount of business, or we'd have to double our prices, like your sales number cannot be so disconnected from reality that it's not possible. But I would caution folks to go to over engineer it on the other direction as well. I think I guess the only things I would say is like use history to understand like what is possible, what does what have existing results been with existing activities. And to
Hmm.
the extent you plan on continuing to do existing activities, you need a pretty good reason why the future results are going to be different than previous results if the inputs are not changing. And it could be that your pricing is changing. It could be any number of things, but like, on the new logo side, again, you need to the inputs need to be somewhat connected to the outputs, grounded in history, and avoid the trap of exponentiality. Like so many folks are just like,
Hmm.
20% growth year over year over year without recognizing that like just because the denominator is growing doesn't mean it's going to get easier. Like linear growth is a more rational assumption for you. And what I mean by that is like if you generated $1 million of new business last year, again, it's more rational to assume you'll do another million of new, which means you'll probably still grow if you retain some of your clients,
Hmm.
but you're not going to just be able to do 20% more just because unless the inputs change, the outputs aren't going to change meaningfully. So those would be those are my overall thoughts on like how to set the sales target for some individual. What do you
Yeah,
think, Nick?
I think you're 100% on. I mean, it starts with what when I was doing equity analyst stuff for the Wall Street shop, Out of a 60-ish hour week, I would probably spend 45 hours just on revenue forecasting for various companies. Like just activities, revenue
I'm sure.
forecasting. It
Yeah,
is it,
that makes sense.
you can get that granular. And there were a few of us on the team, and we were only covering maybe 10, 12 companies. So they had like three or four salaries just dedicated to that much effort to understanding what was happening revenue wise for these companies. Because, right, like
Yep.
you get that right, everything else is easy to forecast. Your decisions
Yep.
are based off of what your expectations for revenue are.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not promoting the idea that anyone at an agency spends 40 to 45 hours a week purely forecasting revenue. That's insane.
Right. Yeah.
Um, what I am saying though is there are a lot of things that you can do to really understand what your revenue forecast looks like. Um, things like getting better visibility into your sales pipeline, into your marketing pipeline, into your funnels, into your conversion rates, all of those kind of things.
Yep.
Once you've eaten all of that, then you can look into industry trends and growth other places. You
Yep.
can throw a 15% average growth expectation and do okay because that's what the industry's been growing at for the last, I don't know, 10-ish years.
Yep.
So you can get away with it just by the fact that like your industry is pretty sick. Like you're
Yeah.
growing
Yeah.
faster
Yeah.
than average. You're one of the
Yep.
faster growing industries out of all of them. But if you want to be able to make decisions based off your forecast and be able to understand what your individual salespeople should be able to accomplish, there's a lot of work that can go into that and doing it correctly. Um, Again,
Yeah.
it starts with like the outputs from your CRM are like valuable to the nth degree. Um,
Yep.
and to be able to use them, though, you need really good inputs. And that's one spot that I've seen a lot of shops just kind of fall off is it takes time to make a note that you had the meeting with this, client or prospect, and it's moving this much farther down into the sales process. Um, like that
Yeah.
alone is huge.
Yes. Well, see, and I totally, you made the comment around like, you could certainly just create a swag if your whole goal is to put a number down on paper that you're
Yeah.
shooting for. But if you're trying to make decisions from it, like,
Mhm.
yeah, again, you could get overly granular, but it is important to understand, as you mentioned, some of the underlying in assumptions, whether explicit or implicit, in the number, right?
Mhm.
Because the most important thing is not necessarily to predict the future, which of course we cannot do, but to understand if the future does not manifest, why not? Right. So, like
Yeah.
your
And what are
sales
your pivot
number,
points? What are your options?
yeah,
Like
exactly.
plan B. Like you should have at least one plan B.
Totally. So, like, it's important for me to know, like, okay, if I'm missing my sales number, is that because I've got fewer prospects? Like, I just took
Mhm.
fewer meetings. Is that it? Is my close rate declining? Right? Am I similar number of at bats, but I'm winning fewer of them? Is my average MRR or my average contract value, is that declining? Is that a function of,
Mhm.
for whatever reason, I'm talking to smaller clients or I'm just pitching smaller things? Is it a time to close problem?
Right.
Whatever, right? Like, so you do have to have some expectation of like, okay, in order for me to generate, my $1 million number or whatever, if that's my sales target, that's
Mhm.
comprised of what? This many proposals at this win rate of this size over this sort of
Mhm.
horizon. So you can diagnose and then ask yourself, okay, my win rate is declining. Why? Right?
Right.
Why? And these are the things that help us answer, to help us optimize the business.
Well, and that's why
If you don't
that
have any of that stuff, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, the inputs to that CRM are what tell you why. Like that
Exactly.
that that is like the real like I don't know. I guess like key that unlocks this whole thing is being able to track data and go back and retroactively say, okay, this happened. We either hit our goal, we beat our goal, or we didn't hit our goal. And then
Hmm.
you can say why based on the data that you have. If you only have random inserts of like sometimes meetings, sometimes calls, sometimes
Yeah,
outreach,
yeah, yeah.
that's not going to be helpful at all. Building that
Yep.
up on the marketing side too is super tough. Like attribution there is crazy difficult.
Yeah,
But
it
if you
is.
can get a little closer on that, like if you can get some insight into your funnel earlier on, and understand conversion rates through that funnel, that's a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep. Totally agree. Okay. I think we got that one surrounded. Caroline, what's next?
Okay, so this one hit my inbox. And just a reminder, in case you're new here, if you don't want to put your question in the chat, no question is a stupid question, but feel free to email it to me privately as well.
Am
And we can also hit it. My email
I
is
going to make fun of
Caroline.
this question?
No, Caroline at
You set us up though.
outsourcingaccounting.com. So this question is a hot topic. We kind of repeatedly get on the hot seats, which is always great. What is the one thing I should be focusing on right now to close out 2024 and prepare myself for 2025?
Ooh, what do you think about that, Nick? What are you what are you thinking? What are priorities?
We are in the middle of strategy season. It's my favorite time of year. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's thinking about what to do next year. The the best thing you can do, and it's foundational, is understand what the hell you want to build. As a
Mm-hmm.
leader, as an owner, as a partner in one of these agencies, know what your end goal is, define that really well, and be specific about it, and then communicate that to your team. If you do nothing else, get everybody aligned and on the same page with going in the same direction after the same goal. How you do it, the paths that you take, the tactics that you use, those can all be massaged, those can all be tested, experimented on, fixed later. The end direction, the end point that you want to get to by this time next year or by this time in 3 years, that should stay the same. That should be rock solid in everybody's mind. So
Yeah.
that's the core piece. Like that's foo-foo up in the clouds. You want some tacticals,
No.
get your sales in order. get your
Yeah.
get your plan to make revenue like done
Yeah.
now and start
Yeah.
executing it
Yeah.
or January 1st.
Let me say real quick and keep going if you've got other sites. I know you said it's like poof over the clouds. It's funny because I referenced earlier. I'm writing this annual annual planning
Yeah.
end of year guide or whatever, and that's like the first thing I wrote, which is so I like literally what? Why are we here? What is it that we're
Yes.
optimizing for? Because
Yes.
and it's a function of having been through so many of these exercises where we just start with like, okay, next year who are we hiring? What are we going to do? What things are we going to buy? You know, it's like we go straight
Mhm.
to the tactics
Yeah.
and without even saying like, hold on a second, like, what are we even trying to accomplish? Like, what are we
Well, they're easier.
ultimately?
Dude, that's a hard
Yeah,
question to answer. That's a
of
hard thing to
course,
say.
of
Like
course, of
I'll sit
course.
down in new calls with people and be like, what do you want? What do you want out of life? What do you want out of this business? What are you trying to achieve? And the number of blank stares I get is just astounding. And I get it. Like if you don't have to be
Yeah,
faced with that because you can just
yeah,
run the tactics, try the next thing, that's fine for a while. This industry
yeah.
has supported that for a while. Now
It
it's getting
has. Yeah, it's getting trickier. Yeah, we're a lot better at like at reacting to things thrown at us than stepping away from that and just getting a hold of what we're doing and being proactive. So
yeah.
anyway, yeah, I agree with that. I mean, what you do, like you said, get your sales activities in order. I mean, there's a number of individual tactical things that I think are important. I mean, this is the time of year where we often get a lot of questions around like, how do I prepare and think about tax? And there's a number of things we can
Mhm.
talk about that, but like, there's a number of things that we can think about and do. But I do think I do think in general that we have the same. This is just a human nature thing. For the same reason that like consumers, like regular people, place a disproportionate emphasis on like New Year's resolutions.
Mhm.
Business owners also place a disproportionate emphasis on like this is the one time I can think about like what activities, what are my goals, what activities should I partake in, like what investments should I
Mhm.
make. It's November, it's December, like I have to do a bunch of things right now because that's and yeah, there are some things. I think we overestimate the amount of moves we can make right now that are going to meaningfully move the needle. And we dramatically underestimate the amount of things we should be doing throughout the year. And so, anyway, I think, like you said, the thing that this is a night, like we just love to sort of pause for reflection. The calendar's turning. And so that's fine. Use that like natural compulsion to lift your head. But again, I think that's where like the strategy, the sort of revisiting, reconfirming why we're here and what our big priorities for next year that are going to help us move the needle towards that why we're here. And then all the other like forecasting, budgeting, making last minute IRA contributions and those sorts of things. Like, yeah, those are important too, but those actually pale in comparison to, the former.
Absolutely.
Um, Hey, let me ask you a question. I don't know. I'm cutting the line here, but you know what? I have the microphone, so I get to do that. And I'm this. You may hate this question the most, but I just know that you probably get this question the most. It just keeps coming up, like at least 3 or 4 times over the past year. Um, people keep. It's been a tough year. Last year was a tough year. I
Yeah.
keep hearing people, trying to grasp for like, okay, what are we seeing? Where's the industry going? What like are there? I mean, I think that's a coded language for like, are there optimistic signs out there? Is next year just going to be better for everyone? There's certainly like there was this belief that one of the many bottlenecks to some sales funnels was the election, just the uncertainty of the election, regardless of which direction you were planning to vote or which administration you thought might win. And now that the election uncertainty is behind us and we have an administration, like curious if you have put any thoughts into like outlook for 2025, if that's a thing
Mm.
that you're sort of working on, or just overall, like what are your, this is just me and my personal curiosity. What are your outlook for 2025 thoughts?
That's a fantastic question and perfectly framed. Um, I it's hard to answer because I see it's it's been hard to answer for a while. The ability to look out and say this industry, industry X is doing really well. Here are the puts and takes against for it and against it, and this is why this thing's going to continue growing at 50% a year and why you should serve that industry as an agency leader. Um, that has not been clear for almost any industry in any geography for the last 2-ish years.
Yeah,
Um, and I think it's been a culmination of interest rates.
yeah,
And I think it's been a culmination and plus this the election thing and what the various administrations plan to do. If you have uncertainty out there, if things look cloudy, everybody from your end market brands to you to everybody else, if it's cloudy out there, they're going to be reluctant to spend. No, people don't like risk. They don't
totally.
like spending when they don't see the ROI. They don't see the clarity of the ROI.
Yeah,
The projects that you do as an agency need a super clear ROI because we just had a time when you had cash just thrown at the industry in 2021.
yeah,
And we had 2022 come and 2023 come, and it was a reckoning. And they said, we didn't
yeah,
get the ROI out of that. So we are now very hesitant
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah,
to invest generally in tech or in marketing or digital marketing, whatever. So you have that coupled with this uncertainty out there that makes everybody hesitant. And
yeah,
interest rates started coming down, right? Like the Fed talked
yeah,
about, a slow walk down.
yeah,
No, I think their most recent commentary was there's no reason to cut drastically. They're going to do this
yeah,
slowly.
yeah,
But we don't know. We're not,
yeah,
you can't see it. Um, so I think that it's been very frustrating for me and for a lot of people out there to understand where to invest and where to put their resources. Like
yeah,
I can't tell you off the top of my head right now an industry that you should go jump into because
totally.
it's incredibly hot. And that's for me, that's rare. That's what I started my stuff on. That was like I used to have an industry tracker for agencies where like,
Really? That's
yeah,
funny.
well, because
Yeah, yeah,
it was easy for me. Like I
yeah,
came from that world where
yeah,
that was
yeah.
one of the big things that I did. And it's super tough now. It's just not easy. Like you could
Interesting.
say, oh, AI, but like, come on,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
stop.
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
let's
yeah,
be
yeah,
serious for a second.
yeah,
Stop.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that generally tracks with how I'm feeling and what I see too. I mean, like a couple things. One, I'll say that 2024 was a good year for our business, and that
Oh
is
God,
a
yes.
function of our ability to work with clients in this industry who have money. So we
Mhm.
were definitely able to, we had a good year on the back of an influx of clients who had money and had needs and were growing, right?
Mhm.
Now, as we look at our portfolio, I could look at any segment and see some clients like take not-for-profits, right? Agencies that service the not-for-profit place, which is a tough place to play.
Absolutely.
Um, and we predictably have clients that struggle in that space, right? And we have other clients who are crushing in that space, like
Mhm.
blowing the doors off of this year. And to be honest with you, the difference in those cases is mostly business fundamentals. Like it's
Oh,
just
yeah.
intention and execution.
Yeah.
And I could just go down the list, e-commerce, technology, software development, production, and I could find two completely polar opposite examples of success and failure. And so I think, and again, it's funny, like zooming way out, I think that you would say, of course, of course, there's winners and
Right.
losers in every space, right?
Right.
But we are still so biased from this exuberance of like 2021, where that wasn't the case. It was uniform success because people were just dumping money in all places, and so we're just like, oh my gosh, that isn't my experience now. It's like, yeah, money's hard to get.
Mhm.
But like for instance, we've got one of our larger clients I view as a bellwether in the technology space.
Mhm.
They predominantly build software and they work in technology. They build technology for technology companies, and these are mostly enterprise. That is an area that had been, dramatically affected by the interest rates and crunch in VC and all kinds of things. And they've had a very strong second half of the year, and they keep taking their 2025 sort of projections up. That's a very strong indication, but that's just really for them. That isn't at all to suggest that experience is going to be similar for their peers. They're great executors.
I
So
think
anyway,
that
like
no, that's a
yeah,
really good point. Like I think you made a fantastically perfect point there. We spend as a industry of consultants who serve the agency space, we spend a lot of time and effort teaching them how to specialize, helping them specialize, doing the
yeah,
research to understand which market to play in, why not to play in this one, why to play in that one, because it helps
yeah,
with an asterisk. If you do not get the fundamentals right, it doesn't matter where you're
doesn't
playing.
matter.
It doesn't
Doesn't
matter what
matter.
you're doing. If you're
Yeah.
not doing the fundamentals, this industry has become so sophisticated over the last decade that you will wash out. And that is very different now than it was 10 years ago. And so
Totally.
I want to
Yeah.
hammer that home. You could specialize as much as you want. It won't make a difference if you don't know how to sell what you do.
And that's it. I mean, it's just the biggest difference is like we have this sort of, there's a group of like, if you build it, they will come sort of
Yes.
mentality. And it's
Yes.
just, and by the way, it's not as if you won't get any revenue that way. You certainly will benefit
You'll
from
get
referrals and
some.
word of mouth or whatever. But man, it is feast or famine. It's not predictable. And it absolutely is not going to carry you. Um, or the ones that have intentional revenue generation, in which case, those who have figured that out and are executing against it well are having great years and will have great years next year.
Mhm.
But revenue, cash is going to fall from the sky.
Yep.
So anyway, all right, Caroline, that was great. I Do we have any other questions, or if nothing, like great in the hopper, we could probably call it there.
Yeah, we can go ahead and wrap up. If you guys want to give your outros, where can people find you if they have more questions?
Well, let's start with Nick. Nick, again, thank you, by the way, so much. Always a pleasure. Love
Yeah.
having you on here and your insights. You come from such a different, same world, but from such a different angle that every time I'm always like, I'm not sure who else is listening, but I'm here and I'm
Yeah.
engaged. Like, I'm so interested in what you have to say. So I love having you. Thank you for joining. Where can folks find you if they want to engage further?
Yeah, I'm fine with us just doing this for ourselves.
I totally
This
agree.
has been awesome.
Yep.
If you
Yep.
wanna catch me, I'm around on LinkedIn sometimes, and then prometheanresearch.com is the easiest spot. We have a newsletter right at the bottom, and I publish everything interesting that we're doing in there. New survey stuff, new research, new reports that are out, all the good stuff that goes in there.
And obviously, from our side, if you're new to Upsource, probably not, but we're an accounting firm for agencies. We provide outsourced accounting, CFO advisory, M&A, as well as tax strategy. We put out all kinds of content in various places. You'll find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on our YouTube channel at Upsource. Caroline, anywhere else you want people to look us up and
You can
Nope.
check out the blog
Website.
page where,
Yep.
we drop guides, blogs, videos, all sorts of
New
content.
guy coming. As soon as I get this thing done, I'm working hard.
Love it.
Anyway, awesome. All right. Well, Nick, thank you so much again. Everyone, thank you for watching. Join us next time, third Thursday. That we might be changing that recurring number. But anyways, as it stands now, third Thursday of every month, back here at the hot seat.